I'm going to read Corduroy. I know it's one of my kids' favorite books, and I really like this book too. Okay. Okay. Corduroy is a bear who once lived in the toy department of a big store. Day after day, he waited with all of the other animals and dolls for somebody to come along and take him home. The store was always filled with shoppers buying all sorts of things, but no one ever seemed to want a small bear in green overalls. Then one morning, a little girl stopped and looked straight into Corduroy's bright eyes. "Oh, Mommy," she said, "look, that's the very bear I've always wanted." "Not today, dear," her mother sighed. "I've spent too much already. Besides, he doesn't look new. He's lost the buttons to one of his shoulder straps." Corduroy watched them sadly as they walked away. "I didn't know I'd lost a button," he said to himself. "Tonight I'll go and see if I can find it." Late that evening, when all the shoppers had gone and the doors were shut and locked, Corduroy climbed carefully down from his shelf and began searching everywhere on the floor for his lost button. Suddenly, he felt the floor moving under him. Quite by accident, he had stepped onto an escalator, and up he went. Could this be a mountain, he wondered? I think I've always wanted to climb a mountain. He stepped off the escalator as it reached to the next floor, and there before his eyes was a most amazing sight. Tables and chairs and lamps and sofas and rows of beds. "This must be a palace," Corduroy gasped. "I guess I've always wanted to live in a palace." He wandered around admiring the furniture. "This must be a bed," he said. "I've always wanted to sleep in a bed." And up he crawled onto a large, thick mattress. All at once, he saw something small and round. "Why, here's my button," he cried, and he tried to pick it up, but like all the other buttons on the mattress, it was tied down tight. He yanked and pulled with both paws until pop! Off came the button, and off the mattress Corduroy toppled. Bang into a tall floor lamp. Over it fell with a crash. Corduroy didn't know it, but there was someone else awake in the store. The night watchman was doing his rounds on the floor above. When he heard the crash, he came dashing down the escalator. "Now, who in the world did that?" he exclaimed. "Somebody must be hiding around here." He flashed his light under and over sofas and beds until he came to the biggest bed of all. And there he saw two fuzzy brown bears sticking up from out of the cover. "Hello," he said. "How did you get upstairs?" The watchman tucked Corduroy under his arm and carried him down the escalator and set him on the shelf in the toy department with the other animals and dolls. Corduroy was just waking up when the first customers came into the store in the morning. And there, looking at him with a wide, warm smile, was the same little girl he'd only seen the day before. "I'm Lisa," she said, "and you're going to be my very own bear. Last night, I counted what I've saved in my piggy bank, and my mother said I could bring you home." "Shall I put him in a box for you?" the sales lady asked. "Oh, no, thank you," Lisa answered, and she carried Corduroy home in her arms. She ran all the way up 4 flights of stairs into her family's apartment and straight to her own room. Corduroy blinked. There was a chair and a chest of drawers, and alongside a girl-sized bed stood a little bed just the right size for him. The room was small, nothing like that enormous palace in the department store. "This must be home," he said. "I know I've always wanted a home." Lisa sat down with Corduroy on her lap and began to sew a button on his overalls. "I like you the way you are," she said, "but you'll be more comfortable with your shoulder strap fastened." You must be a friend, said Corduroy. I've always wanted a friend. Me too, said Lisa, and gave him a big hug. That's one of my favorite books. Okay, so the second book I'm going to read is, I can't choose. Okay, Arthur's teacher moves in. Okay. It was Friday afternoon and Arthur was relaxing. Ooh, no, Mr. Ratburn all weekend, Arthur said. Arthur, said Mom, I just heard some bad news. The snow collapsed Mr. Ratburn's roof and he has nowhere to stay. Oh, too bad, said Arthur, his eyes glued to the TV. I knew you'd feel that way, his mother said, so we invited him here to stay. Oh, okay, Arthur said, still watching TV. Stay here? Arthur ran after his mom. Mom, what did you say? Arthur stammered. Arthur's teacher is going to stay here just until his roof is fixed, said Mom. Arthur couldn't believe it. Later that day, Arthur told Buster the news. It's too weird, said Arthur. My teacher in my house, walking on my carpet, eating from my spoons, and touching my stuff. Buster agreed. School is at school and home is at home because that's the way it's supposed to be. Exactly, Arthur nodded. But his parents didn't understand. It's just plain wrong, Arthur tried to explain. It goes against nature. The poor man has nowhere else to go, said Dad. He's going to stay here, said Mom, and we're all going to make him feel welcome. Arthur tried to imagine Mr. Ratburn staying at his house, but the picture in his head was too horrible. The next day, Arthur borrowed a book from the brain and rushed home to put up new posters. What are you doing? asked D.W. You wouldn't understand, Arthur answered. Are you trying to make Mr. Ragworm think you're smarter than you really are? Go away, Arthur said. Then the doorbell rang. Arthur, D.W. called Mom. Come say hello. Hi, Mr. Ratbite, said D.W. Is it true you torture kids? Here I am, Arthur cried. Welcome. Hello, come in. Please take these up to your room, Arthur, said Dad. He's staying in Arthur's room, sang D.W. I put your sleeping bag in D.W.'s room, said Mom. Hey, no fair, said D.W. Mr. Ratburn saw the books on Arthur's table. Those are my favorite books in the whole world, Arthur said. Mr. Ratburn said. Trigonometry for fun, the double helix, and didn't you just borrow those books from the brain, said D.W. I use my brain a lot, Arthur said quickly. Mr. Ropeburn, said D.W., look what's under here. Arthur quickly leaned against the poster. I think I smell Dad making cake, he said. Cake, said D.W. She ran out the door. Cake, said Mr. Ratburn. He ran out too. Arthur sank onto his bed, relieved. Later, Arthur was watching the Bionic Bunny show. But when Mr. Ratburn came into the room, Arthur quickly changed the channel. You look different, Arthur said. I don't always dress for school, said Mr. Ratburn. Mr. Rathead, said D.W., you were lucky you weren't in school when the roof fell in. It was the roof to my home, said Mr. Ratburn. D.W. looked confused. Teachers don't live at school, Mr. Ratburn explained. We have houses just like you do. Oh, said D.W., the world was so simple until now. Would you like to watch one of my videos, Mr. Ratburn asked Arthur. Of course, said Arthur. I love educational videos. A cartoon kangaroo appeared on the screen. Spooky Poo, Arthur said. One of my favorites, said Mr. Ratburn. After Spooky Poo, Mr. Ratburn covered Arthur's history book with a handkerchief and waved his hand over it. When he pulled the handkerchief away, the book was gone. Shazam, no homework tonight. Wow, said Arthur. Can you teach me that? Sure, said Mr. Ratburn. For dessert, Dad brought out a huge cake. I like it when Mr. Ragburp stays with us, said D.W. On Monday morning, Arthur's friends all shook their heads. Can you imagine Ratburn living with you, said Buster. I bet Arthur's ready to run away, said Francine. Hey, Arthur, said Buster, you can stay at my house until Ratburn goes home. It's not so bad, said Arthur. He taught me a magic trick. We had fun. Mr. Ratburn waved at Arthur. Arthur waved back. At lunch, everyone was talking about the math test. I got a C-, said Buster. You beat me, Muffy said. Arthur got an A, said Francine. It's not fair. Yeah, we could all get A's if Mr. Ratburn lived with us and our fathers made cakes for him, said Muffy. But I studied hard for the test, Arthur protested. Sure you did, everyone said. Then the brain asked for his books back. Sure, said Arthur, I'll bring them to your house. No thanks, please bring them to school, said the brain. Teacher's pet, sang Binky. That means you, Arthur. Then he handed Arthur a note from Fern. Arthur walked home alone. Pal was at the door to greet him. It's great to get home, said Arthur, and forget all about school. Mr. Ratburn was at the kitchen table, eating cake. Oh, said Arthur. Hi. He quickly left the room. Later, Arthur showed Fern's drawing to his parents and Mr. Ratburn, and Binky called me a teacher's pet. Arthur said, maybe I should talk to everyone, said Mr. Ratburn. No, Arthur said, that will make it worse. You know, I wouldn't give you special treatment, Mr. Ratburn said, and you have studied hard lately. If you give me an F, said Arthur, that'll prove I'm not a teacher's pet. Soon they'll realize that they're wrong, said Mom. Not as soon as if he gave me an F, said Arthur. Tuesday at lunch, everyone made fun of Arthur. Teacher's pet, sang Binky. If cake gets you 1 A, will apple pies get you 2 A's, said Francine. Maybe with some vanilla ice cream on top, said Muffy. Arthur tried to laugh. Mr. Ratburn walked over. Arthur, I won't be staying at your house anymore. Really? Said Arthur. Mr. Ratburn nodded. I need to be closer to my house to supervise the work on my roof. So, Francine's parents have invited me to stay with them. After that, I'll be staying at Binky's house. Who knows, said Mr. Ratburn as he walked away. I may also stay at Muffy's, Buster's, Fern's.